Hi everyone, how are you all doing? Welcome back to the channel. For those who don't know me, my name is Bruno Villas, and today I'm going to tell you another story. If you're just arriving here now and you're not yet subscribed to the channel, I invite you to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss notifications. Because that way, every time I publish a new video, YouTube will notify you and you can come watch it with me. I also invite you to follow me on social media, yes, because there I'm always interacting with you, and also posting different content from what I share here on YouTube. But now let's get to what matters and dive into today's case. Anne Nina Rindonsha was born on March 12, 1982, in Mariestad, Sweden. She had two older siblings, a sister named Amy and a brother named Henrik. Annie was described by her friends and family as a cheerful and fun person. She was basically the center of the family, and everyone had a great time with the young woman. Annie's dream was to get married and have children. She loved children. After graduating in engineering, Annie moved to Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, where she worked at Ericsson, a company that became very famous in Brazil, when the first cell phones, popularly known as brick phones, appeared. And in 2009, when she was 28 years old, she traveled to London, where she met Sherwin Dewani. He was 30 years old, and like Anne, was of Indian descent. Sherwin was a successful certified accountant. He helped manage the family business. His father owned a chain of nursing homes. The meeting between the two was basically arranged by one of Annie's aunts. They met at a cafe, and at first, they didn't get along very well. The two weren't on the same wavelength, and Annie didn't show much interest in Sherwin. Even so, they gave themselves the chance for another meeting, and this time, there was a spark between them. Anne returned to Sweden and decided to bring Sherwin to meet her family. Her parents loved Sherwin. He was a handsome, outgoing guy with a great sense of humor, and he was also successful. And a plus was that he told Annie's father that he didn't intend to. He was the kind of guy who didn't consider having sex before marriage, and her father loved this fact. Since Annie lived in Sweden and Sherwin in London, they maintained a long-distance relationship for a certain time, and whenever they could, one would visit the other. In January 2010, the couple broke up because they were not handling the distance very well. But in February of the same year, they got back together, and Annie decided to leave everything in Sweden and move to London so they could finally be together. In May 2010, Sherwin proposed to Anne, and they officially got engaged. Their wedding took place in India, the country of their ancestors, and it was a luxurious affair. The celebration lasted 3 days and had all the best of everything. After the wedding, they returned to the United Kingdom to have a civil ceremony. Sherwin was organizing a surprise honeymoon for Anne. She didn't know the destination, but she was sure that her husband would have made the perfect choice. So on November 7th, they left for their honeymoon, and the secret destination chosen by Sherwin was South Africa. The first city they visited was Mpumalanga, where they spent a few days and even visited Kruger National Park, which is the largest protected wildlife area in South Africa. And on November 12th, they headed to Cape Town. As soon as they landed at the airport, Sherwin called a taxi to take them to the hotel. The taxi driver was named Zola Tongo, and he used a Volkswagen minivan for work. He took the couple to the Cape Grace Hotel, which was about 20 minutes from the airport. When they arrived at the hotel, Ain went inside to check in, while Sherwin talked with the taxi driver. He spent about 10 to 15 minutes talking with the taxi driver, thanking him for his service, and arranging possible future rides. Sherwin even mentioned that they wanted to have dinner the following night, and asked if he could take them. Zola said he could, no problem. So the next morning, on November 13th, Sherwin called Zola to take him to the city center, so he could exchange some money. And as soon as he returned to the hotel, he and Anna spent the whole day enjoying the accommodation. They spent quite a bit of time at the hotel bar and had several drinks. Then at 7:30 that evening, Zola returned to the hotel to pick them up and take them to dinner. They had made reservations to dine at a restaurant called 96 Winery Road, which was highly recommended, and very well located. However, on the way there, they decided they no longer wanted to go. They wanted something simpler and just a light meal. So at 9 p.m., Zola dropped them off at the Surfside restaurant. Around 10:30 p.m., the taxi driver went to pick them up, to take them back to the hotel. However, the couple decided they didn't want to return to the hotel immediately. They asked Zola to take them to experience the everyday life of South Africa. After all, they were staying in a 5-star hotel in a tourist area, and what they really wanted was to experience African culture. The place Zola took them to was a township called Guguletu, which apparently wasn't the safest place in the region, especially to visit at 10:30 at night, right folks? During the journey, at an intersection where Zola had to stop to wait for another car to pass, 2 armed men appeared and pulled Zola out of the vehicle. While one sat in the driver's seat, the other got into the back seat with the couple, and they basically kidnapped the two. They drove for 20 minutes, and during this period they reassured the couple, saying they wouldn't harm them, and that they only wanted the car and would release them, but separately, at different points along the way. Then they reach a point where they force Sherwin to get out of the car and continue on with Annie. Meanwhile, Zola, who was the first to be taken out of the car, had already reported the robbery and kidnapping to the police. And Sherwan, as soon as he got out of the car, went knocking on doors in the area where he had been left, until he found someone who would help him and call the police. As soon as the police reach Sherwin, they are already with Zola. They then take Sherwin and, along with the taxi driver, bring him to the hotel where he was staying. By this time, Annie's parents find out what was happening through Sherwin's parents, who broke the news that Annie had been kidnapped. The curious thing is that it wasn't Sherwin who informed them, but rather Sherwin's parents. Then Annie's father called Sherwin, and he apologized, saying he hadn't been able to keep his daughter safe. Annie's father reassured him, telling him to stay calm, that she is not dead and won't die, as they will pay whatever is necessary. Sherwin basically ignored everything Annie's father had said, and once again apologized for not being able to keep his daughter safe. As soon as Vinod, Annie's father, hangs up the phone, he takes the first flight from Sweden to Cape Town, South Africa. But this flight had a layover in Amsterdam. On the morning of the next day, November 14th, even before Vinod landed in Cape Town, the police received a call from a resident living in Kailicha, which is about 20 minutes from Guguletu, and they reported that there was a silver Volkswagen minivan that had been parked on that road all night, and the minivan matched the description of Zola's minivan. So the police went to check, and they arrived at the location at 8 in the morning. That's when they discovered the lifeless body of Anni Dewani lying in the back seat. She had been shot at point-blank range, and the bullet went through her neck and lodged in the car seat below her. There were no signs of sexual abuse, but there was sand on her feet and abrasions on her back, which indicated that Annie probably tried to escape, but was detained. The young woman's father was on a layover in Amsterdam, ready to board a flight to Cape Town, when he received the news about his daughter's death. He said he spent the entire flight from Amsterdam to Cape Town feeling completely shattered. The investigation began immediately, and right from the start, several red flags indicated to the investigators that this was not a simple random kidnapping. The first question raised was that, according to Sherwin, the kidnappers kept saying that they only wanted the car. So why did they leave the car behind? Another point is that Zola knew Guguletu was a more dangerous area, especially at that time, and particularly for tourists who were unfamiliar with the region. So why would he take them there? And one of the biggest red flags for the investigators was why the kidnappers let Zola and Sherwin go, but did not release Annie. They didn't ask for a ransom. They didn't abuse her, which would justify keeping only the woman. If they wanted to, take advantage of her. And it wasn't because she saw their faces, because the other two, Zola and Sherwin, also saw their faces. So what would be the reason for them to end only Annie's life? Immediately, the media took over the case, and there was immense pressure for the authorities to quickly solve this crime, especially because South Africa had just hosted the World Cup and was reaping the benefits of this extensive global exposure. Many people from around the world were considering traveling to South Africa, and that incident could deter potential tourists from the country. In fact, the investigators found the first suspect very quickly. It was Zolaila Mingeni, 25 years old, and he was arrested on November 16th, just 3 days after the crime. He had an extensive criminal record. Although it was not a violent one, what placed him at the crime scene were his fingerprints found in the vehicle. He also confessed everything immediately, and gave the name of the other kidnapper who was with him, who was 27 years old and named Miswa Madoda, Kwabi. And he even said that it was Miswa Madoda who shot Annie. On November 18th, Miswa Madoda was taken in for questioning, and just like Zolaile, he confessed everything immediately, and also reported the involvement of a third person named Mandla Mobulombo, who was 33 years old. In his statement, Awonkage Nisi, Mandla said that the taxi driver Zola had come to him and said he needed to arrange a murder, and that he put Zola in contact with the two kidnappers, Solile and Miswa Madoda. Then 3 days later, Zola Thongo was also arrested. The police took Zola's statement, and he claimed that the truth was that Sherwin Dalwani, Annie's husband, had been the mastermind behind the attack on his own wife. The police officers asked for more information, and he ended up detailing the accusations of Sherwin's involvement. According to Zola's statement, he had met with Sherwin in the hotel parking lot, right after they arrived in Cape Town. On that occasion, Annie entered the hotel, and Sherwin spoke with Zola for about 15 minutes. It was during this brief conversation that he allegedly asked Zola if he knew someone who could do a job. This job was to kill his wife and make it look like a random attack, as if she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He further stated that he would pay 15,000 rands to each person involved in the attack. This amount corresponds to around 5,000 reis, 900 euros, or 1,000 US dollars. Zola continued his testimony and clarified to the investigators that he explained to Shirin that he did not have the necessary resources to carry out the job, but he had friends who could help. And that's when Monday came into the story. Zola and Monday met shortly after the 15-minute meeting between Zola and Shiran, and the two quickly contacted Miss Mamadoda. The phone records of calls made and received corroborated Zola's testimony, in addition to the internal monitoring and security footage, which captured the moment he received calls from Zola and Monday. The next day, November 14th, Zola stopped by the hotel to pick up Shirin and take him to the city center, where it would be possible to find a currency exchange to convert the cash. Additionally, it was necessary to calculate the total amount to be paid to everyone involved in the attack, because they would only accept payment in cash, to prevent being traced, of course. As soon as Shirin was dropped back at the hotel, Zola went to meet with Miss Mamadoda. It was precisely at this meeting that Lula Mangeni was introduced to Zola. Ms. Mamadoda introduced her friend, assuring Zola that he was trustworthy. It was also agreed that the job should be done that night. Therefore, that night, Zola stopped by the hotel to pick up Shirin and Annie, and took them out for dinner. Shortly after, he took the couple to Gugulathu, and it was at this point that the car was hijacked, and Annie was murdered. Zola further explained that the next morning, even before the body was found, he had a brief meeting with Shirin at the hotel, where the couple was staying. He was quite anxious, and was pressing Zola to quickly confirm if everything had gone as planned, and if Annie was indeed dead. This brief meeting between the two was captured by the hotel's security cameras, where you can see the moment Shirin arrives, waits a few moments until Zola approaches. A few days later, Shirin and Zola meet again at the Cape Grace Hotel. This is the moment when Shirin makes the payment for the service. The cameras catch the young man entering the hotel with an envelope and leaving without it. It is also possible to see the moment when Zola enters after Shirin and then leaves the hotel carrying the envelope. As soon as they became aware of Zola's full testimony, the investigators began to investigate everything about Shirin, and in a short time, they managed to triangulate his messages and discovered that on the day of Annie's kidnapping, Shirin was sending text messages to Zola at the exact time when the three of them were in the same car, driving to dinner. What's strange about this is why would he send text messages to his driver, who was right there in front, just a few inches away from him? The only explanation is that his wife, who was beside him, could not know the content of this conversation, which, in this case, probably as we already know, was about her murder. Guys, how horrifying. Bizarre, right? The investigators also discovered the last messages sent from Annie's phone to her family members. In the messages, she said she was very unhappy and that it was definitely a mistake to marry Sheeran. She was completely regretful, and that love had turned into hatred. Moreover, she only thought about going home soon. The police also noted that there were some discrepancies in Sheeran's testimony, which is usually not a good sign. The investigators contacted Annie's family, and one thing also caught their attention, because every time he called her family to talk about matters, there were always small mismatches in information, like times, places, street names, and things like that. Each time he would tell a slightly different story to the young woman's family. On December 7, 2010, Zola made a deal with the prosecution, in which he would receive an 18-year prison sentence in exchange for his testimony. Based on this, the South African police obtained an arrest warrant for Sheeran, who by this time was already in the United Kingdom. He did not stay in the city to follow the investigations. And also, before Zola's deal with the prosecution, there was nothing the justice system could do to keep him in the country. In the meantime, Annie's funeral was being prepared, and Sheeran showed no interest or respect for this very sensitive moment for the family. In fact, on the night before the funeral, he threw a party at his house for friends, hiring some girls. On the day of the funeral, it was even worse, because he appeared angry and was completely disrespectful to Annie's family. In that same month, December 2010, a few days after Zola's legal settlement was filed, Sheeran was arrested in England only to be released shortly after on bail, and his family hired a lawyer specializing in international law, and also a man named Max Clifford, who is a public relations specialist, to handle the media attention that the case began to receive. Max immediately portrayed Sheeran as a loving, caring, and lawful husband, who was grieving and suffering greatly from his wife's death. To make matters worse, rumors emerged that Sheeran was a closeted gay man, and Max immediately worked to quash these rumors. But that's when Sheeran's image got even worse, because a well-known sex worker in England came forward saying they had already had relations with Sheeran and even shared sordid details of the encounter. Shortly after, it became public that he had an active profile on a site called Gaydar, which is a dating and hookup site for men. 3 months later, in March 2011, a hearing was held to decide if he would be extradited to be tried in South Africa, and the judge reviewed the case and decided to send him back to Africa. Sherwin's lawyer quickly filed an appeal, claiming depression due to all the scandals involving his name. The defense also presented but evidence of a hospital admission following a suicide attempt. With that, he avoided extradition, which could only happen after he was fully recovered. It's evident that this whole situation was quite painful for Annie's family, right folks? They decided after 6 months to scatter the young woman's ashes in Lake Verne, which was her favorite place. The family's life changed completely, and even her father and sister began attending bi-weekly psychotherapy sessions. In addition, of course, to dealing with the pressure and harassment from the media, and also with the exhausting legal battle against Sherwin's defense lawyers, who, with each new extradition hearing, made new appeals, and prevented their client from being sent to Africa. Between the years 2011 and 2012, everyone involved in Annie's case in South Africa was tried and convicted. Mezua Madodakwane also made a deal with the prosecution, which, in exchange for his testimony against Sherwin, granted him 25 years in prison. Zola, as we already know, received 18 years. Monday also made a deal to testify against Sherwin, and was acquitted. His acquittal caused quite an uproar among the public, who argued that he deserved a sentence similar to Zola's. Solile Mengane was not offered a deal, because the prosecution claimed they already had enough against Sherwin. As a result, Solile was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole, but he died in prison sometime later due to brain cancer. It was only in 2014 that Sherwin was finally extradited to Africa, and his trial began in October 2014. The prosecution demonstrated that he was a closeted gay man who married only to satisfy his family. His religious beliefs also did not allow for divorce, and because of this, he killed Annie, as it was the only way he could get out of the marriage. The prosecution also showed that Sherwin was active on gay dating sites the entire time he was in South Africa, and accessed pornographic sites daily. Additionally, Annie's messages to her family, venting about how unhappy she was, were shown during the trial. Sherwin's defense claimed that their client was bisexual, and that this did not interfere with his marriage in any way. Regarding the footage showing him entering the hotel with an envelope and leaving with nothing, the defense argued that Sherwin was paying Zola for his services as a private driver, and that there was nothing illegal about it. The defense continued and questioned Zola's testimony. After all, their client was well educated and would never, under any circumstances, arrive at the airport and ask the first taxi driver he saw, "Hello, I need to kill my wife. Do you know anyone who could do this job for me?" Sherwin would not be foolish enough to commit such stupidity, according to his lawyers. The defense lawyers then claimed that in fact it was Zola who observed the couple's profile full of jewelry, expensive watches, and designer clothes, and immediately called his accomplices and planned everything. Sherwin's lawyers were relentless and pointed out several holes in Zola's statements, confusing the prosecution and steering the case in another direction. So much so that after 2 months of trial, the case against Sherwin was dismissed and he was free to return and live his life normally in the United Kingdom. The judge of the case, Ms. Janet Traverso, said that Zola was the only one capable of linking Sherwin to the murder, and his testimony was full of inconsistencies and therefore could not be credited. She further stated that none of the other involved parties had credible testimonies, and that together they could easily have fabricated this story to incriminate Sherwin. In other words, basically there was no case against Sherwin. Annie's family was devastated by the news, and for them, justice had completely failed. For some popular opinions, it was worse than that. Justice had been bought with a lot of money. After Anni Dewani's release in December 2014, Annie's family requested that a UK court reopen the inquiry into her death and compel Sherwin to publicly answer questions. On September 9, 2015, at the Brent Coroner's Court in North London, Mr. Andrew Walker said he did not consider it appropriate to grant this request because a criminal trial had been conducted in South Africa. As a result, Annie's family's request was denied. On January 22, 2015, a formal complaint was filed by the Higher Education Transformation Network, alleging judicial bias and prejudiced behavior by the judge in Sherwin's trial. But 3 months later, on April 25th, a Judicial Conduct Committee dismissed the complaint, stating that it was completely unfounded. The Public Prosecutor's Office did not appeal the sentence, and also did not file any complaint against Judge Janet Traverso. An interesting fact, folks, is that a South African newspaper called Times Live published an article in August 2018 announcing that Sherwin publicly came out as bisexual and is dating a Brazilian named Gladson Martins. The news is from 2018, so I don't know if they are still a couple, but I thought it was interesting to share this information with you. Folks, this case is very obscure because we don't know if he bought off the justice system, if he bought off the lawyers, because maybe he didn't even need to buy the justice system, since the lawyers were so good, and managed to counter the prosecution so effectively that he could easily win this hearing. But in any case, many people believe he is indeed the guilty one, the mastermind behind the crime. But I want to know your opinion. What do you think? Do you think he is really innocent? That justice was served? Or do you believe that he is indeed involved, but he had too much money to be imprisoned? There is another case similar to this one on the channel, where the guy was so rich, had so much money, that not even his name was revealed. I'll leave a link here in the comments for you to watch after this one. Well, folks, that was today's case. So if you've stayed with me until now, don't forget to leave your like, which really motivates me to keep bringing this type of content. I'll stop here, and see you in the next video.